Hey guys, I am Zhekov from the Phoenix team,
And I'm Georgi Zhekov.
and we are about to show you the new stuff that we added to Phoenix 5. So what we're going to do today is we're going to walk you through the changelog that we have on the Chaos Docs site, and we're going to take a look at all of the new features, the new improvements, and we're going to tell you everything that we know about them, and we're going to show you some simple setups with simple basic geometry, low-res simulations, just to give you an idea of what all of the new stuff can do. And yeah, but basically that's it.
Yeah, we're gonna play around with some simple setups and show you how the new stuff works. So let's dig in. This is our release changelog, and you can find it on docschaos.com. And when you click on Phoenix, and in here in the version changelogs, we have 500. So here we have the release video and what's new in our new builds. So we have created new things for the active bodies, where we have created a directable thruster force and a new tool that's called axis lock that allows you to lock the movement of bodies to a certain axis so that they can move only horizontally or vertically. And let's see how this works in practice. So in here, I will import this Speedboat model that we have. Okay. And right away, we can show you how the new stuff works by using the Speedboat preset that sets up all the new things for you. It sets up the thruster force and the axis locks right away. And if we create a preset, you can notice that our boat is a bit rotated. So let's rotate it. And we can see that my model got imported with the wrong center point. So let's go and fix this. Here, I'm going to set affect pivot only and center it to object. And now we can rotate our boat about 90 degrees, like so. Sure, let's do it exactly 90 and start the sim. And what we have for this sim is we have an active body thruster node that has picked our boat, and it has a certain magnitude. So the magnitude is how strongly our boat will be propelled forward. And we have some initial velocity so that our boat won't start from 0, and it will have some velocity at the start of our simulation. And for the axis lock, what it does is it allows you to affect a certain body. Again, this is the boat. And we have locked the translation on the y-axis. So if I go in here and rotate the camera a bit, you can see the y-axis is in here facing to the side. So the boat won't move to the side. And we have locked the rotation on the x and the z-axis. So the boat won't rotate this way and won't rotate this way. So essentially, the boat will move up and down and will rotate forward.
Yeah, it would pitch, yeah, but it would not steer to the side, so it would not roll.
Okay, so actually, let's run the simulation with a bit lower grid resolution so that it goes faster. I will reduce the total cells number to 1 million cells, and let's start again. And we can see that our boat moves with a certain speed. And if we want our boat to move faster, what we can do is we can go in here into the magnitude, and I can say that we need 5 times faster boat, and it will start accelerating more. And as you can see, the boat is moving only in a straight line because the axis lock prevents it from going to the side, but it's bouncing up and down. And of course, for the thruster, you can always animate the value so that it starts from 0 and picks up the speed, or it's moving faster and you animate it down to 0 and our boat will be stopping at some point. And so that we don't wait too much, I think that we can already see what's going on. And if I go in here and scrub the timeline, you can see that we have our boat that's creating nice foam and it's jumping up and down.
Yeah, it just managed to bounce once.
Yeah, and of course, if you want to restore your simulation and pick up from where you left off, we have introduced this cool new button on our Phoenix toolbar that's called Restore. And if I press it again, you'll see that we go back to the previous backup frame and our simulation picks up from there. So if your power went out, or if you decided that you need to take a break and resume your simulation later, the restore button is a nice way to do that instead of starting again from frame 0 and waiting 30 more frames.
Just a note, if you're new to Phoenix, you can control the backup frames from the output row out of the simulator. So by default, Phoenix saves the entire simulation state to the cache files at each 15th frame. But you can change this. You can, if you change this to 1, then it would mean that you would be able to restore from any frame. Or if you set it to 0, you won't be able to restore at all, but your caches would be with the smallest possible size.
Now, if I go into my simulation rollout, and we know that every 15 frames we have a backup, and when we get to the 45th frame, we'll see that in here, in the cache file content window, we'll have a message that this is a backup frame and you can restore from here.
Here it is.
Okay. So this is about the new thruster force and the new axis lock. So what's next? We have a new and enhanced presets. So we have quite a few new presets, as we already shown the Speedboat preset that we have. The next thing that we have added, again for the active bodies, is the ice cubes preset. So let's start from the beginning. I'll reset the scene and let's make a few boxes like so. And what we can do is let's position some of them like so, so that we have some variation. And let's pick our ice cube preset. So what it does is it creates a simulator for us and an active body solver that has our boxes ticked in the interaction list. And if we start our simulation, our simulator will be initially filled with some liquid, and our ice cubes should start floating around and colliding with each other. And if they hit the walls of our simulator, we have added a brand new option that's called jammed walls as obstacles. So what it does is, if the walls of our simulator are jammed, this will mean that the active bodies will treat the walls as colliders. So they will bounce off the walls. And we can see here, this cube hit the wall and it's bouncing back inside. And the other ones are floating as well. And what we have added for this preset is, if we go into the Phoenix property lister, the property lister shows of the nodes in the scene and their Phoenix properties, so that you can easily change many values at once. And in here, we can see that the mass density, the mass or the density, in this case, the density for the cubes is randomized a bit so that each cube bounces or reacts to the fluid a bit differently.
Yeah, some of them will sink, some of them will float for longer. And of course, these are not necessarily ice cubes. So you could use this preset just as a quick way to set up a simulation of any kind of floating debris, boxes, cardboard boxes, wooden boxes, whatever, pieces of broken spaceships or whatever you like. It's just an easy way to get started with active bodies. It just creates the active body solver, it connects it into the simulator, picks it in the dynamics rollout, and just saves you some time that you would otherwise have to do this manually. And as for the property lister, Phoenix bodies still have their individual object properties also accessible. So here in the property lister, you can see the object properties of all of the possible geometries in the scene. But otherwise, from the right-click menu, you could still access the old node properties, which are per object. And these are the same.
So you can use whatever you like. If you want to adjust one body at a time and it's easier for you, you can do it from this menu. Or if you want to change like all the bodies at the same time, you can just shift select the tick boxes here, and you can just type in another value and it will change it for all the boxes.
Yeah, especially in cases where you might have hundreds or thousands of objects and you want to change some of the properties, just make them non-solid or change their mass or their density. The property lister is the way to go. Otherwise, it would take you a lot of time.
Now that we have changed the density to 200, so our bodies will be a lot lighter. So let's see how they will react to the liquid. They should be floating a bit more at the top. Yeah, we can see that they're not sinking this much. Yeah. So,
and there is also one more thing that we can show, that active bodies they work with the liquid solver, but they don't really need liquid. So, for example, we could just turn off the initial fill up, and we would have just a plain, pure rigid body simulation without any fluids.
Yes. Let's disable the initial fill up in the dynamics rollout, and if I start the simulation again, we can see that our bodies are start to fall down and they're colliding with one another, and if they hit the walls of the simulator, they should bounce back, like so.
Oh yeah, this also brings me to another thought, that if we disable the option to use the jammed walls of the simulator as obstacles, for example, you could have the active body simulation happening anywhere. It doesn't even have to be inside of the simulator. So you just have to have a simulator somewhere in the scene, and the active bodies would continue working. So, for example, you could create an active body ground plane, which would constrain them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would just fall forever.
In this case, they're falling forever. But what we can do is go in here and create a plane, like so. And in the active body solver, I can say turn on the ground plane and pick this plane in here. Now our bodies should start colliding.
And if I remember correctly, it's a bit different in Maya. There we have a special Phoenix ground plane node.
Yes.
That you have to create.
So
otherwise, in Max, you just use a geometry.
If we go back in Maya, and I can just create cube component, and in order to save time for the setup, let's go and pick the ice cubes preset again, and I'll move the simulator to the side, and in here in the liquid rollout, I will disable the initial fill up. And what we can do is go into the phoenixfd menu, and in here in the create menu, we have the active bodies ground plane. So in here in Maya, this is a procedural helper that's not renderable, and it won't affect the rest of your simulation at all. It will just affect the active bodies. And I can shift select my active bodies over with my ground plane selected. So they're both in the selection. And I can go in here and turn on the use ground plane and set the selected object as ground plane. And if we start the simulation again, you can see that our bodies are falling and bouncing off the ground.
They started doing different things now.
Yeah.
They started off similarly, but then things changed.
Yes. So this is how active bodies are working in Max and in Maya, and how the new presets look. So this is these are the new presets for the active bodies, but we have new presets for the other things as well. So let's see what we have. A really cool preset that we have upgraded is the fire preset, actually. Or should we just show the Stormy Sea preset first?
Yeah, let's continue.
Let's continue with the liquids. Okay, so in here we have a Stormy Sea preset, and I will go into my settings for the grid, and I will reduce the resolution so that we have a bit faster feedback of what's going on. And we'll start the simulation. And let's go under our preview, and you can see that the detail reduction turned on. This way, when we rotate our viewport, we get immediate feedback of what is going on without too much slowdown. But if you want to get a better sense of what the sim is doing, we can turn off the out reduction, and I can set to 0, and immediately we can see a better preview of how our simulation looks like. And what the Stormy Sea preset does is it creates a wave force that will create waves inside of the liquid simulation. And compared to the ocean preset, these are real simulated waves and not just displaced waves. So this will show up not only inside, not only during render time, but there will be waves splashing directly with the object that we have created for the preset. And of course, the waves, while they're simulating, they will create splashes, foam, and mist. And in order to simulate the real movement of mist in the Stormy Sea, we have created a plane force that will affect only the mist particles. So this way, the mist will be blown away in the direction of the plane force, while the other particles will move with a different speed, and this will create a sense of wind in a Stormy Sea scenario.
We can actually show you how it looks rendered on the dock side, where we have all of the presets just rendered out. As
what we can do is go in here, and under the quick simulation setup, let's go to the Stormy Sea. Actually, you can see in here all the setup. They just need a bit of time to load because there are a lot of videos in here. And let's scroll down a bit to the bottom, and we have the Stormy Sea. And this is how it looks in action.
And of course, you could increase the resolution even further and get even more details. But I think that the default resolution is around 5 or 6 million voxels, which is ultra low res, so that it runs quickly. But yeah, you could get a lot more details with a better resolution, and the overall shape and behavior of the simulation should be pretty much the same because it's driven by the wave force, and it helps keep things similar between low and high grid resolutions.
And meanwhile, if we go in here, the preset is almost done. So let's stop the scene and let's center it. And if I scrub the timeline, we can see how our waves start forming, and they start splashing inside and crashing and colliding with the object in our scene. So this is quite useful if you want to create a ship or an oil rig or a lighthouse, for example. Whenever you need stormy weather and some random waves that are hitting an object, this is a nice way to start your scene and tweak it the way that you like it.
Yeah, the object that you use for the preset is going to be solid, is going to be static, is going to just be an obstacle to the simulation. So it will be there for the waves to crash into.
And actually, another, while we were talking about waves and simulations and splashes and mist, this is a nice, cool setup that we can show what we did for the active bodies. So if I create an active body solver in here and pick our object. So let's say that we want our sphere to float up and down together with the waves, but we want the foam and mist to be born only around our object. So this way, for example, we can save a bit on simulation time, and we can dial down the settings a lot faster without having so much foam and splashes generated everywhere. So what we can do is, in order to make this sphere active body, we have picked it in the active body solver, but we need to link the active body solver to the simulator. So in the dynamics role, I'll pick the active body solver. And if I start the simulation now, actually, did we reduce the bit resolution? Yes, we did.
Yeah.
So if I start the simulation now, you can see that it created a Phoenix, a clone for our object, and the original of our object went non-solid and non-renderable, so that we can have only the active body interacting with the sim. And right now, if I leave it, you'll probably notice that it's way too heavy and it's sinking.
Yeah, so the difference between before and this setup is that the sphere is still an obstacle, but now it's also an active body. So yeah, first off, we have to adjust the mass or the density of the active body so it keeps floating and doesn't sink to the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, currently it starts sinking. So I will stop the sim and let's go into the Phoenix property lister. In here, I will select the sphere and let's choose something really light so that we make sure that it stays always on top of the simulation. And let's start the sim. And what I wanted to show you for this setup is, if I go into the foam rollout, in here we have bird volumes. So the bird volumes are nothing new. They're in Phoenix for quite a while, but now you can use the active bodies as bird volumes as well. So now we can choose the bird volume in here, and we need to pick our original object so that it works correctly with our simulation. And let's do the same thing for the foam and the splashes and the mist. And if we do this right now, you'll notice that there are no particles born at all.
No particles.
No particles. So why this happens is because the active bodies are solid by nature. So this means that they will kill everything that is inside of them. And what the bird volume says is spawn particles only inside of the volume of the selected object. So in this case, our volume will delete the particles, so that's why we don't have any particles. And what we can do is increase this volume fade distance. What this will do is it will take a radius around our object, and it will start spawning particles there. And this one is in centimeters. So if I select my sphere, we can see that it's around 47 centimeters. So if I go back in here, I can increase the fade distance to 47. And let's do this for the mist and for the foam.
And this way, natural birth of foam and splashes and mist can happen even around the sphere. Otherwise, liquid particles, splashes, foam, they cannot penetrate the sphere because it's solid. It's going to repel them. It's not going to allow the liquid particles in, and this way the bird volume actually cannot really do anything. But this way we would allow foam and splash to be born around the sphere, and when it happens, then foam and splash, they can leave this place and they can travel elsewhere. But this is going to be the only place that they could be really created.
Actually, we'll wait a bit for the scene to develop and our particles to start showing. If you have such a scene where you're interested in the secondary particles and not so much on the liquid. And for the second part, by the secondary particles, I mean foam, splashes, and mist. What we can do is turn the show checkbox next to the liquid, and this will leave only the other particles in the preview. And as we can see right now, the foam, mist, and splashes are born only around our active body.
And yeah, the new thing that we wanted to show you was that in Phoenix 5, now you can pick active bodies in node selector slots, such as the node selector for the bird volumes, such as the node selectors, for example, on the Voxel and particle tuners. Or you could pick active bodies even as emitters inside sources. And yeah, basically everywhere in Phoenix where you could pick a certain node, now finally active bodies can be selected there. Before this wasn't possible, but now you can use active bodies as emitters, so they can do their active body thing and roll around and just do their rigid body simulation and emit liquid simultaneously. Or you could even go crazier with a setup that Georgi is going to show right now.
Yeah, so essentially what we can do is we can pick, for example, the distance to an object. And if the distance is less than 5 voxels, for example, or let's say 10 in this case, what we can do is we can change the RGB, for example. But for this to work, I'll need to stop my sim and go and enable the RGB channel for our simulation. So I can go into the output row and enable the particle and the grid RGB channels. And what the RGB channel does is it stores color value data for the simulations. And if I go in here in the dynamics row, we can say that our particles will be like green, for example.
By default.
By default. So if I start my simulation now, all the particles should turn green. Yes. And because we have the particle tuner working, what it does is it changes the color only around our active body.
In this case, we thought that we want to increase the red channel, and yeah, because we already have green, it turns into yellow. But for example, we could force it to red by changing the increase by to I think it was set.
Yeah. Okay.
Like set to 1. And
yeah, no. I think actually this
it's not gonna help because they're still going to blend.
But what we can do is I can shift drag my particle tuner, and we can do the inverse thing. So we can say if the distance to the sphere is greater than 10, then we can set the RGB green to 0.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
There we go. So everything turned red. And in here, it's yellow around our active body. So this is a nice way to control your simulation and give you a lot more control and creative possibilities to do crazy, wild things.
Maybe we can show the active bodies inside of sources. Use as emitters as well.
Yes. Okay. So let's reset the scene. And actually, what we can do is let's show it with our Speedboat again.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Who is trying to drag it?
I messed it up.
Maybe.
Okay.
Here it is.
Here it is. So let me center it. And I remember that we needed to center our pivot object. And okay. So once we are ready, let's create a Speedboat preset as a start, but let's modify it a bit. So in this case, we know that we need to rotate our bolt, but what I will do now is select our simulator and disable the initial fill up. Yes. And I can do the axis lock and I can lock the translation in Z. So this way our boat won't fall down and we know that it will move straight forward without going up and down. And we have something like this. Okay, actually it's rotating, so I need to lock the rotation as well. And now it should go in a straight direction. Okay. And now what we can do is we can create a liquid source. And I can pick again the original. When you pick active bodies in sources or in particle tuners or whatever that you need to use active bodies, make sure to pick the original object because the active body clones that are created are deleted on each start of a new simulation. So your simulation won't work. Actually, let's try and do this and see what's going on. If I run the simulation, you can see that it says deleted. So what you need to do is pick the original object. And if I start my simulation now, you can see that our boat will start emitting liquid and particles. But in this case, we want our boat to emit only from the back in here, where the engine will be, for example. So what we can do is let's delete our simulation. I will select my original and let's go into the object properties and turn off the display as box for a bit. And let's delete the clone so that it doesn't get in the way. And in here, if I select my polygons here, and we can go and select these two, and we can set an ID of 7, for example.
7 is a good number.
Okay. And what we can do now is go into our liquid source and go in here, and for the polygon ID we can set 7, and if we start the simulation now, we can see that our boat is emitting only from the back.
It's actually creating a lot of foam, so probably this is some remnant of the setup that the toolbar preset created. So maybe we can just turn off the foam simulation and just leave only liquid to be emitted, and even splashes as well. Let's have just the liquid. And eventually, if this works out, we could jam the walls of the simulator so that it won't escape. Yeah, but we already locked the access by using the access lock. And also, it's time to delete the thruster.
Yes. So
that we are sure that only the source propels the active body forward.
Yes. So let's go here and delete the thruster and start our simulation again.
Yeah, let's see what happens now. Okay, yeah, so now just a little liquid is created, and now we can really boost the discharge.
And you can see
here it is. Woo!
And we can boost it even more. And you can see that now
it really took off.
It really took off. And in this case, so actually this is a nice example. You can see that we have some lines and our liquid emission is not continuous. So we have spots where there are no particles. So why this happens? This is because our object is moving way too fast and the simulation can't keep up. So in case you have really fast simulation, really fast moving objects, what you can do is go into the dynamics rollout and increase the steps per frame. So let's try 5, for example. At some point, I guess I rotated the bolt a bit.
Yeah, but still the axis walk keeps it under control.
Okay, so now it looks a bit better, but obviously it's still way too fast.
Yeah, we gave it enormous speed, so it's kind of expected to need a lot of steps per frame in order to get like continuous emission from the source. But you can see that it's getting there. But we really, we really made the boat just move very, very fast.
Yeah, actually, we can see that it's moving quite fast. Our simulator is long 84 meters, and we cover 84 meters in 7 seconds. So
you sell 7 frames.
Yeah, in 7 frames. Yeah, this is
just a fraction of a second.
Super fast. But yeah, you can see that increasing the steps per frame made our liquid emission a lot better.
Sweet, yeah. So you could go crazy with your setups. In fact, yeah, if we want to be evil, we could just remove the axis walk, make the walls jammed, and just make the speedboat bounce off the walls and see what happens. Yes. But yeah, maybe we could do this another time.
Maybe next time. Okay, so let's go to the next thing.
Yeah, let's go back to the changelog. So we took quite a journey.
Quite a detour. But yeah, new and enhanced presets.
What else do we have? So we showed the ice cubes and speedboat. So now you can set up active body simulations with just one click. So now it's much faster. We showed the
Stormy Sea.
And we also have a jet engine preset. It's something that we had an example seeing for a long time. We've been sharing it in the forums whenever people asked. So yeah, we finally have it in the toolbar. It was waiting for a long time, and yeah, it was less than a day's worth of work to get it in. So yeah, sorry for the big delay. Here it is.
Here it is. So you click it, it creates a long simulator, and this is how it looks.
If I remember correctly, it used a discharge modifier to direct the jet downwards, but I think that downwards meant downwards in the local space of the box. So for example, now if you take the box and rotate it, it's going to don't stop it. Let it continue. So if you rotate it like this, it's going to start discharging to the side. Or yeah, if you even rotate it 180 degrees, it's going to start blasting upwards. So yeah, it has a discharge modifier. It uses a direction in the local space of the box. So it's basically it's locked on to the box, and it's going to produce the jet stream in that direction.
Yeah. So if you don't know what discharge modifiers are, in here in the fire source, under the outgoing velocity, we have this thing called modifiers. It's not only here, but we have it for all the other channels. And in here, we have already created one. So we have these
arrows.
Let's
call them.
Thanks. Yeah. And in here where we don't have one, so we have this plus sign. But let's go into the arrows in here, and you can see that the modifiers allow us to modify the specified channel by a certain modifier type. So in this case, we're modifying the emission along the normal Z direction. And in this case, we use the object space. So this way, as we have explained already, rotating the body will have effect on the emission. And if you want to use world space, you can just go in here and choose world. And now
it's going to emit downwards.
Only
no
downwards.
matter.
Yeah. No matter if I rotate it like so, you can see that it starts emitting from the other side. No matter how I rotate it, it will always use the Z direction. And you can see that in here probably.
Yeah, it's even trying to emit from both sides because they're inclined, like 45 degrees kind of. So yeah, if this was a sphere, it was going to emit only from the lower hemisphere.
Okay, so this is how the jet engine preset works, and it's quite fast to simulate, and it looks really good. So you can use it for engines, gas stoves, or whatever crazy thing that you can think of.
Yeah, and I think that more often than not, we've got requests for gas stoves rather than jet engines of airplanes or something. So yeah, it's basically the same thing with just tweaked render setting.
Okay, and the next preset that we have improved is the fire preset. Actually, the old fire preset was a bit outdated already. It was a few years old and needed reimagining. So
yeah, we didn't really like it. And unfortunately, since it's the first preset on the toolbar, we saw it a lot on the internet and thought that it was about time to improve it and make it better.
And while this simulates, I can show you a really nice addition that we have added in Phoenix that works great with V-Ray. So what I can do now, if I go in here, yeah.
And we can switch to V-Ray GPU IPR.
We can choose start V-Ray GPU IPR, and this will continue running while our simulation is running on the CPU. Our renderings are running on the GPU, and currently it's building the GPU light cache, so that's a bit slower in this case. Where did my render settings go?
Yeah, maybe close them, open them again.
Okay.
Here they are.
Here they are. So I can disable my GI for this shot, and we can start the IPR again. And
here it is. It simulates on CPU, renders on GPU at the same time. So basically, we removed the limitation where when you start rendering, it has to pause the simulation, and then when the render is done, the simulation resumes automatically. So now with V-Ray GPU, you can render and simulate at the same time. So if you have a good GPU and a good CPU, you can load your machine much better.
And you can even do this in the viewport. So if I go in here and enable the V-Ray viewport IPR, and we can see this is our rendered result. If I create an object in here, let me do it like so. And if we enable our GI back again, our fire should start casting light over our object, like so.
Yeah, so you could see that while we had GI off, let's try to do something here. while we had our GI disabled, the V-Ray APR rendering looked pretty much like the Phoenix GPU preview, because the Phoenix GPU preview is not bad. And but one of the things that it cannot do is actually illuminate the scene around the simulator. So with V-Ray APR, you would be able to get the proper lighting. And also, if we add smoke into this mix, of course, it would be shaded much better than what the Phoenix GPU preview allows, because the idea of the GPU preview is speed, but with V-Ray IPR, you can get also the stuff looking pretty good. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah.
But this is actually not everything. So you can see that until this moment, it took a few minutes to simulate, and we can do even better because we added something new to Phoenix 5, which is the Phoenix Standalone Simulator. So it's, if you've seen V-Ray Standalone, it's a console app, which is a standalone renderer. So for the V-Ray Standalone, for example, you are in Max and Maya, you export VR scenes from Max and Maya, which contain everything that V-Ray needs to know about the scene. And with the Phoenix Standalone Simulator, it exports simscenes, which are basically the same format as the VR scenes. They contain the simulation data, and you can see that it's almost real time, so it's working pretty good, pretty quick, and it's running significantly faster than the simulation in Max. And if we go back to Max, we can see that the result that we are getting for this particular setup is pretty much the same. The Phoenix Standalone still has a lot of stuff that we need to add to it. So, for example, it doesn't support animations on settings. You cannot animate options yet. You cannot animate geometries, and the supported nodes are only the simulator and the sources right now. But it's running pretty quickly, and from the Phoenix FD menu, you just select Export SimScene, and you have the option to do what Georgi just did, to start the simulation and simultaneously preview it with the Phoenix Standalone Preview, which we've had for some time now. And basically, when you do this, you can just close Max or close Maya and just let the Phoenix Standalone simulation run. So here's the SimScene, and if we go to the we can, it's just a text file. No, just drag the entire thing.
Okay, so this is how the scene looks. So it's in text format, which allows you to modify it afterwards. So let's say in this case, our simulation is starting from frame 0 to frame 1000. But let's say that you need a few hundred frames more or a few hundred frames less. So we can say, how about sim only 10 frames, and if we save the scene and run it, we'll simulate only till frame 10 without having to go back and re-export scene in Max. So this way, all of these parameters in here are editable. So if you know what each one does, you can change it, and it will affect your simulation so that you can tweak the scenes easily without going back to Max and changing them there and then exporting the scene again. Just having this control inside of a text file is really powerful.
And for now, we have something else as well. So for example, you can open this and you can just copy the path and open it in Explorer, so that we can show something else, that we also added another tool to the Phoenix installation, which is the SimScene node viewer. So if you just double click it, it's just going to open in the SimScene viewer, and here it is. So it shows you all of the nodes that are inside the SimScene, and you can check all of the properties. You cannot edit them yet, but we imagine that we're going to have this pretty soon. So also the node viewer, it also supports VR scenes, so you can drag and drop VR scenes from V-Ray and inspect them here as well, so that you don't have to deal with scrolling the text editor and figuring stuff out. Here you can see the separate nodes and the connections between them. So it's a handy little tool that hopefully we would be improving in the future. And yeah, under Windows by default, it's associated with you can just double click it. You can just double click the simscenes and open it in the viewer. And what else? Since we mentioned association of different Phoenix files, we also made the Phoenix Standalone Preview associated by default with the Aura caches of Phoenix, with VDB files, with F3D files, and with PRT caches. So now you can just...
So we can go into this folder here. And I can double click on a cache. And what this will do is it will start my Phoenix Standalone Preview tool. And in here, it started with the my one. So that's why our cache is rotated to the side. But we can easily fix this with the flip up axis. So it comes up flipped because Maya is using Y up instead of the Z up that is in 3ds Max. And now you can see that we have the cache preview turn on, and it works with the double click. And it goes like this.
You can also check out VDB files, PRT caches from Krakatoa, and Phoenix can also export PRTs and VDBs. So yeah, you can now inspect them easily without having to open them in Max or Maya or Houdini or whatever. So you can just use the Phoenix Previewer to check out those caches and see what's inside.
Actually, so while we're talking about PRTs, before we leave, so let's go in here and check the simulation, and we can see that this one simped in 1 minute and 20 seconds, 25 seconds. That's a lot faster than the other simulation that took around 3 minutes. So the Phoenix Standalone is quite a lot faster for some scenes. So while we were talking about PRTs, so let me show the folk how PRTs are working and how we can use them and what are they. I'm pressing the wrong button all the time, so that's why maximizing view is not working. So I can create a burning fuel preset, and let me reduce
the grid resolution.
The grid resolution a bit.
Yeah,
it's very low.
Yeah, it's quite fast anyway. So
so let's do it.
It's going to grow because it has adaptive grids.
And the burning fuel preset creates some drag particles. In here, I have selected my simulation raw, and if you go in here in the cache file info, you can see that it starts creating some particles. So let's bump them up because we need a bit more. So what I can do is select my fire source, and in here for the particles, let's create 10 times more.
We can turn off the GPU preview in order to see them better.
And let's go into the preview route, and I will turn off the GPU preview, and we can turn off the temperature and the smoke and the fuel so that we can see our particles.
And maybe we have grid reduction?
Yes, I think we have the reduction. So this is how our particles look. And if you wish to export them to a PRT format that is read by other various applications, you can right click in the viewport, and there is the export to PRT particles. And in here, we can choose the frame range and which particle system that we wish to export. In this case, we have only one particle system, and we can choose which particle channels we wish to export. So, okay. And let's create a folder called PRT. And okay, so it's particles and export. Now, if we go to the desktop and go in here, and if we double click, you can see that our particles are here. And if we scroll down again,
let's flip the axis,
and we can see our particles, and you can see that the preview is quite fast. Again, this is with really low number of particles, but even if with larger number of particles, the preview inside of the Phoenix Preview is a lot faster than the native ones of Max and Maya.
Maybe we can increase the particle sizes in order to
Yes.
see them better.
And here under the particle preview, we have a particle size. I just need to choose my particle system in here, and we can see our particles. Okay.
So it works. Yeah, and something else that we added to the new version of Phoenix is that now you can load PRT files directly into the Phoenix simulator. So before we had to use a separate node which was called a PRT reader. This node was available in Max. It was not available in Maya. But now we can load PRTs directly into the simulator.
Let me make a brand new simulator.
Yeah, because this one already has this. Yep, here they are. And yeah, this way you can load PRTs in Maya, finally. So what we still need to do is to allow you to export PRTs from Maya. So now you can export PRTs only from Max, but this should be coming soon as well. We gotta do it.
And what this allows us to do is retime particles as well. So I can lower down, but I needed an ID channel. So if I go in here, in the fire source, I can enable the ID, and let's enable the age, for example. And it prompts me to ask which simulator I need to start. So I need to simulate the first simulator. Okay, it starts loading the particles from the second simulator.
Let's just delete it. Maybe it has more than one steps per frame, and this is why it's trying to read the data from the other simulator.
Or we can just hide it.
Yeah, this would exclude it from interacting. So now we have, now we're starting with much more particles in the beginning. If we want even more particles, we could, for example, use the cigarette smoke preset on the toolbar. It's going to create a lot of particles. They are just going to look like a continuous stream of particles. And yeah, once again, the Phoenix Previewer handles them very quickly, and it's quite interactive.
So I think this is quite enough. So here are how they look with the normal motion and the normal speed. And in here, these are the PRT particles.
But we have to export them first.
These are the old ones. Yeah. Okay, so let's...
Something else that would be good to have is to allow exporting PRTs simultaneously while the simulation is running, so that we can write them to the storage just like our files and just like VDPs, so that you don't have to go through the manual export process. So I have to think about this. It shouldn't be too hard to do.
And now, if I go in here, in the simulation, in the simulation role of our second simulator, and in the cache file info content, we can see that our particles have an ID channel as well. And now
we could even delete the first simulator just to show that there is no connection between them. So, okay. That's good enough. Maybe we have some detail reduction in the preview again.
Maybe yes. So let's check the preview. Nope. In this case, it's just less particles. Or did we?
Maybe we didn't load the new caches.
But if they have IDs, so they are the new caches? Nope. Or did I overwrite the caches on another place? Probably I recorded them
in the default
location. So
so we can just copy it from here. Yeah. You can just copy the path. Here it is.
And let's go here. Second simulator.
Yeah, we can just delete the Phoenix macro. Open, and here they are.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the correct ones.
And now, if we reduce the play speed, like so, and you can see the particle. Actually, let's hide the box so that it's not flickering all the time. And I will hide this one as well. And we can see that our particles are moving way slow. So this is a nice way of retiming PRT files.
Yeah, we can do this even with PRTs that are coming from other software. It doesn't have to be generated with Phoenix. And this is something that the PRT reader could not do before. And now that the simulator can load these, we can do all of the simulator things with them. Like this.
Yes. Okay, so let's get back to the changelog and see what's new.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing that we implemented is realistic form patterns. So what we had before is we had some patterns for the phone, but they had all the same sizes and they looked a bit boring. So what we introduced now is some new way of controlling the phone patterns. So let's create a liquid simulator, like so. And go into the settings. I will lower the grid resolution so that our simulation runs fast. And I want to turn on our initial fill up so that we have some liquid at the start. And let's go and enable the phone. Actually, let's create a particle shader. Okay, and so that we can create some particles at the start. Let's see first where our liquid is. So I will enable the show mesh option in the preview, go into the rendering rollout and enable the cap mesh and turn on pure ocean. So what this will do is it will show us the water level of our simulator even without simulating. So now this gives us a rough guide where our liquid will be. And now I can go in here and create a box like so. And let's position it on the surface of our liquid. And I want to emit foam from this box. So let's go into the right-click menu, and in the Phoenix properties, I want to make this box non-solid. So this way, it won't interact with our simulation at all. It will just be used to brush foam particles. And let's right-click and go into the object properties, and I'm going to make to display as box. So this way, it will be invisible and it won't get in the way. And the next thing that we need to do is create a liquid source. Then from the liquid source settings, I will pick the box. Pick the box like so. And we don't need liquid in this case. We need only particles. And let's create foam particles. Then what I can do is select our simulator and disable the pure ocean as we don't need it anymore. And let's start our simulation. And we can see that this immediately creates some particles, but it creates them on the surface of our box. So this is because I have it in the surface force mode. So let's choose the bottom brush mode. And this should create the foam particles inside of our box, like so. And you can see that our foam now, it looks uniform and it's all the same over the whole simulation. So actually, let's brush a few for the first 5 frames, for example, some particles, and then we'll stop the emission. So I'll create animation like so. and offset the start keyframe like so. This way, on frame 5 we have 100% for the brush, and on frame 6 we have 0. Then let's start our simulation. And if I go into the foam settings now, in here we have controls for the foam patterns. Before, this option called here formation speed was called strength, but we decided to rename it so that it's a bit more clear what this option does. So if I set this to 1, for example,
foam patterns are going to start forming.
Yes.
But we have to, it has to happen when the foam gets born first.
Okay,
So
yeah.
we have to start the simulation again. Maybe we could also increase the number of foam particles created from the source.
So
yeah, few.
Let's give it a bit more foam particles. Let's try like this.
Yeah.
And what we can do is let's hide the mesh and the liquid particles so that we can see only the foam. And now you can see that we have some patterns emerging.
Yeah, maybe we can hide the mesh.
Okay. Mesh.
Here it is, without any mesh. And yeah, these are the new default foam patterns. They have 2 new options which allow you to change the size variation. So by default now they have some size variation, meaning that we have smaller and larger patterns. And we also have this option called stringy, which just creates those strings of particles between the different patterns. So if we increase it,
let's try with 1.
Yeah. Let's see how it looks. It's just going to create those thin strings of foam particles between the patterns. And if we reduce it, there are going to be these wider areas with more foam between the different patterns.
Okay, so this is how it looks with stringy of 1, and in here you can see this is stringy of 0.5.
Yeah, so if we set it to 0, let's see how this works. Yeah, so now you can see that the foam patterns are much less pronounced, so they are not that. They're a bit,
So this is with 0, and this is with 1.
Yes. So basically, there is more space between the patterns, and if we also reduce the size variation, even if we zero it, increase stringy back to 1, then we're going to get the strongest effect and the most thin borders between the foam patterns. And also we have the radius control, which we had before, which it's in world units, so right now it's in centimeters.
Yes, so essentially, if you want bigger patterns, what you can do is you can increase this size. So let's try 50. And this now will create bigger patterns.
Yeah, here it is.
Okay, and actually, if you want to create more variation in your foam, a little nice trick that you can use is, let's hide the patterns for now. So we'll get only uniform foam around here. And what we can do is use a texture to modify the foam emission. So what we can do is go in here in the map, and let's try a noise texture. And I will open the material editor, and let's drag the texture. And if we do it like so that it's a bit more contrasty, and start the simulation, you can see that now we have a lot more variation in the foam formation. And if we make our texture fractal and change the size a bit, so let's try 15, you can see that we have some variation now. And now if I go and turn back our patterns, so let's try 1 and increase our variation, and let's try it like so.
Yeah, here it is. So first off, foam gets created and then the patterns kick in. Well, these patterns are
way
too large.
Yeah, way too large.
Yeah, and also here we have a setup where all our foam is created right at the beginning, so the patterns kick in all at the same moment, and then they just die off. But in a more dynamic simulation where you have foam created and dying all the time, the patterns are going to be created all the time. So it's going to be different, and it's going to also be more diverse and more interesting. Yeah, so here it is, and yeah, you can see the stringiness between the patterns here is very clear.
And we have some bigger patterns and some small ones, and this way the foam looks a lot better in my opinion.
Also, in Phoenix 5 we made a lot of changes to the parameter called B2B interaction, which meant basically how strongly foam sticks foam particles stick to one another. And this option and the splash liquid-like option, they got a lot of changes. So now they are both more suited to large-scale ocean simulations. And we also renamed B2B to foam volume, which I think better describes what it does. So this is the option that you should use when you want to simulate beer and coffee foam, and you want to increase the foam volume in order to get more foam volume. So if you want to get like bigger chunks of foam sticking to each other, you have to use this option. So you can combine the foam volume with the new patterns and get some interesting, crazy results as well. And yeah, with more foam volume, the foam patterns are not going to be so flat on the liquid surface. So
actually, yeah, we can create some sun. Let's lower the intensity a bit. Now we can render our foam. Oops, our helper box is renderable. And you can see that our foam now has some volume due to the foam volume option.
Yeah, but beware, because this option slows the simulation down. And yeah, also in this case, we have this foam volume, but if we create more particles at the beginning, we can get larger chunks. So when we enable foam volume, the particles, the actual foam bubbles are going to take into account their sizes when they form these larger chunks of foam. So yeah, if we create even more particles, we're going to get these larger, taller chunks of foam. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So now we have really many tools to create interesting foam patterns in ocean simulations, and these are not now the foam and the foam volume are not just reserved for small scale beer and coffee simulations. They are much better suited to oceans now. And with this trick that Georgi showed you, you can also start off your simulation with foam already created in some areas and missing in other areas in order to get even more interesting effects. So maybe we can move on.
Yeah, let's go and check what's going on with the rest of the simulations. Okay,
so yeah,
with the magic of the editing, we switched places. So now switching will take over.
Yeah, because it's halftime, and yeah, we really gotta switch now. So okay, the next thing that we added to Phoenix 5 is the voxel shader node. So if you're familiar with Phoenix, you know that until now we had a particle shader node. So the voxel shader is very much it's very close to what the particle shader does. And so here's the particle shader. And if we go to the Phoenix menu right here, we can create a voxel shader. You can see that in the viewport, they look pretty similar. So the idea is that the particle shader connects to a simulator, which has particles inside it, and renders them. So the voxel shader also connects to the simulator and renders the volumetrics inside of that simulator as fire and smoke. So let me see. I'm going to use the fuel fire preset that we have here in the toolbar, the burning fuel preset, in order to show you what the voxel shader does. So reduce the grid resolution just a bit, running the simulation again, and just like Georgi, I'm going to turn off the GPU preview and turn off all of the other previews in order to show you that there are some particles here. So the particle shader that the burning fuel preset created selects these particles and renders them as points. So if we create a V-Ray sun, this, reduce the intensity a lot, render it out. Here is what it's gonna look like. Okay, let me see. All right, so I will turn off GI, zoom in more. And yeah, here is the burning fuel preset. So even if I want the particles to pop out more, I can force motion blur only for the particle shader. And let's see.
Do we have enough particles in this frame?
Not a lot. There are quite few. But I can use the motion blur multiplier just to exaggerate the particles and make it visible that we have those right here. Okay, so here we're getting some particle streaks. And yeah, so we have these small particles. They are really not a lot, which are rendered in the burning fuel preset. I'm going to reduce the motion blur multiplier back. And we can also now I can let me start from turning this fire simulation into a mesh. So I enable show mesh from the preview, and here the simulation starts rendering as mesh in the viewport. If I go to the render settings, I can also change it to mesh mode for the actual render. Here it is. So you can see how black it is because I disabled GI.
And just note that by default, the channel that will be meshed is the smoke. But in here for the surface channel, you can choose a different channel for the temperature, for example, but you need to adjust the isosurface level to 800, for example, or more, because the temperature goes a lot higher than the smoke values. So yeah, in here you can see the temperature channel being meshed.
I can even smooth it out so that it's not so jagged. Here from the input rollout, I can choose temperature, smooth the channel, and now it became quite smooth. So again, let me go back to the isosurface level. And yeah, here it is. So here is the temperature channel meshed, and if I render it, I can probably enable GI now. Okay, here it is, and we have these embers around it. So here's the temperature, here are the particles, and now I can create a Phoenix voxel shader. And you can see that the user interface here is just like the render and grow out of the simulator. Now I can pick the simulator as a voxel grid, and if I go into the volumetric options, I can turn off the fire, use a constant color for the smoke color, use simple smoke for the smoke opacity, and if I render this out, I will get the smoke from the simulator rendered by the voxel shader. So this means that I have one grid, it contains the voxel data and the particle data for these particles, and I can render it simultaneously as a mesh, as a bunch of particles, and as smoke at the same time. I can even reduce the opacity of the smoke, I can make it brighter, for example like this. Let's see how this works. Alright, so here it is, we have a mesh inside the smoke, so the mesh represents the temperature, the smoke comes from the simulated smoke, we have the particles, and this is how the voxel shader works like. So for example, we could use this for even more complex setups. For example, we can create a liquid setup and render the white water of that liquid with the voxel shader inside of the liquid mesh. So we're going to have a tutorial coming for this soon, hopefully, and we're going to show you the workflow for this, but it's a more powerful tool, and we hope to continue improving this and making it even more flexible in the future.
Yeah, while this was possible doing in the previous version of Phoenix, now you needed to make two simulators to make sure that they're on the same place so that the data is not mismatched, and it was a lot more tedious to set up. So now it's just a single simulator. You just create the voxel shader, pick up your simulator, and voila. So now it's a lot easier to make such complex setups.
Yeah, and I can even create more of these embers with the count multiplier of the particle shader, because we really had too few particles simulated. And yeah, basically that's it for the voxel shader. Hopefully we would continue the trend, and we have some other new nodes in mind which would make everything much more flexible. So yeah, moving on.
Let's go.
We covered the standalone simulations. So again, we still have a lot of options to add. We still don't have foam and splash. This would be like a day or two worth of work. So keep an eye on the nightlists, and we're going to be adding everything that Phoenix supports in Max and Maya to the standalone simulator. And it's really fast and it's really flexible. And if you have a complex pipeline, you could integrate it in it. And going now to the complete combined changelog since Phoenix 441, which was our last official version of Phoenix 4. So starting from the first new feature, Size Variation and Stringy, we covered that. And I think that we don't have much to add. We showed you how it works. Multi-threaded the routine where moving particles moving obstacles push the flip particles. So now this is a bit faster. So we're looking for code that runs on just a single thread, and if we find any such instances, we multi-thread them and improve them. So now if you notice that Phoenix is running on just one or two cores, it's probably the part of the simulation which is communicating with Max and Maya and asking them for meshes and particles and forces, because unfortunately Max and Maya cannot do this multi-threaded. When we communicate with the host, we have to be single-threaded. And yeah, if you see your CPU is not fully utilized, it's probably either this or it's writing or reading cache files from the hard disk or from the network.
Yeah, but generally, so now flip simulations are a lot faster. So test them out.
Yeah. So we made a lot of improvements to the speed, and Phoenix is now generally much faster. There are different areas that we sped up, particularly here in the changelog. And the next thing is the Burn Smoke RGB option. So let me show you how this works. So I'm going to create a fire and smoke simulator. I'm going to create an emitter. So for example, this sphere, and make it emit temperature and smoke by default. If I start the simulator, here it is. So then I'm going to create another emitter. So for example, this box, and I'm going to place it right here next to the emitter of the temperature and smoke. Create another source for this. I'm going to plug it as an emitter, and then I'm not going to create any temperature. I'm not going to create any smoke. I'm just going to create some fuel. And if I start the simulation right now, nothing happens. I have to enable fuel in the output rollout. Here it is. Start the simulation once again. Here's the fuel. It starts rising up. Whether it rises up or it falls down depends on these options here, fuel buoyancy. So in this case, it just gets entwined by the smoke and the temperature simulation. So it draws it in and pulls it up. And if I enable burning, this fuel should ignite. Here it is. You can see that the flames slowly start to grow over the fuel and it starts igniting. And the new option that we added is right here, Burn Smoke RGB. So if you choose to emit colorful smoke and temperature from the source right here, I will enable RGB in the source. I'm going to enable RGB in the output rollout, grid RGB, simulate again, and I'm going to enable the GPU preview. So now you can see that what's emitted from the source is already green. If I enable the GPU preview, I have to also go to the rendering settings, and you can see how the flames engulf the second emitter. And I'm going to use RGB for the smoke color. And then I'm actually even going to disable the fire so that you can see better that the smoke that is produced from burning this additional fuel right here is black. So this new option allows you to gain more control over this. So finally, if you enable Burn Smoke RGB and make it pink, for example, now the smoke that is produced from burning fuel is going to have a specific color. Until now, it was always black and you had no control over this. So now you can finally choose what color the burning fuel would produce. So that's
essentially it gives you a lot more control over your look of the smoke. So you can make RGB simulations a lot better, and this gives a lot of variation when you do explosions or burning simulations where there is fuel involved. The RGB channel is a nice way to add more variation and make your smoke look a lot more organic, because in nature nothing is super black. There's always a tiny bit of color and it looks much better, in my opinion at least.
Sweet. Okay, so should we move on to the next option?
Yes, let's go.
Pick active bodies as emitters. Okay, so we already covered that. They can be emitters in sources, attractors in body force. You can use them as attractors in body force. Yeah, this is important because you could have an active body rolling and
it can start pull liquid towards it.
Or to repel it.
Yes.
And we can use it in voxel or particle tuners, and as bird volumes, and even as render cutters. This is one more of the node selector slots that now you can pick active bodies in. Tracer node, axis constraint node, we already covered that. Jammed walls as opticals, we already covered that. Effect by foam option for the active body solver. So now this is a new option that the active body solver has. Until Phoenix 5, active bodies were actually always affected by both the liquid and the foam particles. So if you had foam, it's also pushed the active bodies just like the liquid did. So now there is a specific option about this, and now it's off by default. So by default, only the liquid is going to affect the active bodies.
So why we have added this option is because if you had a simulation where you had a lot of foam, and this foam would push your active body up, and it will really change your simulation. And sometimes you don't want the foam to get in the way. You just want the active body to bounce up and down on your surface, like the Speedboat preset, for example. And meanwhile, you need a lot of foam. So this way, the foam won't push the boat that much. And you have control exactly how much the foam will affect your active body simulations.
Yes, so actually, yeah, I can show you even how this option looks like. It's it's right here, and yeah, it's not just an on and off checkbox. It's a spinner between 0 and 1, so you can choose the strength of this effect. And yeah, if you create a Speedboat preset and then increase it, you're going to find out that it's going to start behaving very differently when all of the foam that the Speedboat generates starts pushing back on the boat. So it's more suited for some more specific cases where you really need the foam to push the active bodies. Okay, so next up, the separate voxel shader node. We already showed you this, and the particle shader has this new option to flatten the particles near the borders of the liquid simulator. So let me show you why we added this. So it's a more specific use case. So for example, I can create a Stormy preset. Let me decrease the resolution and just let it run. I'm actually even going to turn off the foam, turn off the splashes. We don't need that for this showcase, and start the simulation. So it's going to create a wave force, which is going to start pushing the liquid particles up and down. I'm going to turn off the particle preview, show the mesh, and because we have a refractive material, a completely refractive material applied to the mesh, now the mesh is invisible. So I'm going to go into clay mode. And here are the simulated waves. So for this, I can even stop the simulation right now. So for this preset, the render mode is cap mesh by default. So you can see that only the top surface of the liquid is shown as a mesh. If I go to ocean mesh mode, this is going to make a difference. So let me just show the wireframe. If I switch between, I can even actually increase. I don't need the displacement here, so it's more clear. So when I go into ocean mesh mode, the mesh is actually going to the height of the mesh inside the simulator is going to start decreasing as it approaches the borders of the simulator. So there is a more smoother transition between the waves inside the simulator and the flat infinite ocean area around it. So this is not the case for cap mesh mode. So when you have cap mesh, it's near the borders. You have all of the waves are preserved. I can even go into, for example, like the orthographic camera just to show you that. So again, if I switch to ocean mesh mode, you can see how the mesh gets flattened towards the borders of the container. So now the particle shader, when it renders particles coming from a simulator. So for example, I can pick the simulator and choose to render the liquid particles because we don't have any other particles, but in a more regular use case, you're going to want to render the foam and the splashes. So when I pick the liquid particles, enable liquid simulator, choose this one. This would this would allow me to use this option, flatten at ocean borders. So when I render the particles, they're going to get the same algorithm applied to them that flattens the mesh near the borders of the simulator. This same thing is going to happen to the particles as well. If it doesn't, those particles that are near the simulator borders, for example, if you have a stormy sea with a lot of foam and a lot of splashes, those particles, they're just going to remain hanging in the air and they're going to look weird. So now this new options allows those particles to just follow the what happens to the ocean mesh and render more organically with it. So it was a complex explanation, but it really helps in large ocean setups where we have a lot of foam and splash, and there was no workaround for it until now.
So yeah, long story short, if you have some particles that are hanging in the air near your ocean borders, just make sure that the flatten at ocean borders option is on for your particle shader, and this should solve those issues with hanging and flying particles in the air.
Yes. Okay. Cover from RGB channel. This is a new option, again in the particle shader, which had workaround before. So there was a way to do this. So let me just create a new scene, and I'm going to create some, whoops, nope, I didn't want to create this. And I'm going to create some emitters and set up a ink and water preset. So if I start it, this is kind of an Easter egg that when you have several emitters and you create some type of toolbar presets. So for example, whenever you can have different colors, the toolbar presets create different colors for each of the separate emitters.
And
so
yeah, this works not only for the ink and water, but for the paints as well. So you have different types of paints, for example.
If I remember correctly, because I did this quite a few years ago, this also works for the explosion preset. So if you create an explosion, you're going to have, so for example, gray, black, brown smoke emitted from the different emitters so that you have a more interesting explosion. So yeah, I'm going to stop the simulator now. It created some particles which are enough to prove our point. And these particles now are rendered differently than what we had in Phoenix 4. So now all of these particles are rendered with one particle shader, and they have this new option, color from RGB channel, enabled. So you can see that the particle shader has all of these three particle systems selected. So it's just one particle shader rendering them, and it's going to use their particle RGB to shade them. So here you can see in the simulation rollout, you can inspect the data inside of the loaded inside the simulator, and here the particles, they have positions, velocities, and they have colors. So this new option allows the particle shader to directly read the color channel from Phoenix particles and render them with their assigned RGB color directly. So before we had this option, there was a way to do the same thing, but it was more convoluted. So let's start the rendering, and here it is. We have colored particles rendered by the particle shader. So when we didn't have this option, what you had to do was to enable color from texture, pick a particle texture, a Phoenix particle texture, here it is. Pick some of the particle systems, and then choose the color of the particle system. So for example, RGB, and this would allow the particle texture to read the RGB from the particle system and then tell the particle shader that this is the color that this certain particle system has to be rendered with. And also, because the particle texture supports only one particle system, you had to create 3 separate particle shaders in order to render the 3 different colors. And this was slow. And also, there was a catch, and because we still have the particle texture, there continues to be a catch with the particle texture that the speed of the particle texture is very much dependent on this parameter here. the particle area radius. So the higher the radius is, the slower the particle texture is going to be. So you have to be very careful, because you could make your scene render like 5 or 10 times more slower than it could at best, by just not being careful about this parameter. So it has to be as small as possible without starting to be too small. You're going to understand if the particle area radius is too small if some black artifacts start showing up in the render, because the color that each particle reads from the particle system is just going to be shrunk so much that the default black color is going to start showing up in the render. So this was the old way. Now it's much easier. You don't need this at all. You can just use the color from RGB channel and render it quickly. And so the ink and water preset is also simplified. Before Phoenix 5, it created one source and one particle shader per each emitter. Now it can shade all of them with just one particle shader. So setups like this are now going to be much faster. And any crazy particle setups that you could create, which use particle RGBs, can now render more quickly. Okay. Am I missing something?
Yeah, generally this is a faster way of rendering particles and faster setup. Still, if you need the super control that the particle texture gives you, you can still do that, because the particle texture allows you to remap certain values or increase the color values and use different channels, because for now the color, the new option allows you to pick up only the color from the RGB channel. But if you want to use the other channels and go crazy with them and remap them and do some interesting shading tricks, you can use the Phoenix particle texture.
Yeah, so I can even how did I yeah, so I'm not going to do this, but yeah, I see that the particles render red now. So if I base the particle color on their position, I can remap that to a certain color and get different shading. So indeed, the particle texture is much more powerful. It's much more flexible. It has a lot of options. But if you're looking only for render speed and you just need the particle colors, then the new color from RGB channel option is what you should choose. Okay, PRT cache import straight into the simulator and the standalone preview. So this is without the need for the PRT reader node. So we already explained this. The Phoenix Standalone simulator. I think that we showed pretty much everything. So if you now you have the option to launch it from Max or from Maya, but otherwise you could just browse to it. We have the directory of the standalone simulator here in the help file. So it's under Phoenix Tools, standalone simulator. So it's located here, and you could browse to it and you could launch it from the console. You can pass different arguments.
It's a command line tool, so it doesn't require any licenses for Max or Maya, and you just give it a simple command line like phoenixfd.exe, followed by the scene file name, and it will start simulating right inside of the command prompt. So now switching.
Yeah, I can show you, but I don't want to scare you. So here's how it looks. It's phoenixfd, scene file, and where is our scene file? Probably.
No, it's in the default Max directory. But
yeah, here it is. Yeah. So probably this is the file preset that we exported before. And yeah, it starts running. So it would save the cache files wherever the simscene tells it to. So now it's going to export it again in the default directory because we didn't save our scene to just an untitled. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to close this now. And moving on. Standalone simulator. Yes, we have the Phoenix FD menu. So we have three options. You could just export a sim scene and do whatever you like with it later. You can export and simulate it right away, or you can export, simulate, and preview. So keep in mind that the preview is still going to take some CPU time. So if you are using the preview option, it's going to be slightly slower than just simulating it without previewing it. It's the same in Max and Maya, so it's previewing always takes some CPU time. This is why we have this option right here in Phoenix for Max and Maya, which says read cache for preview. By default, it's always, but you could set it to disable during sim, so that it's going to be faster when you run a simulation. And if there is no one around to watch it, you could just do it like this in order to have it finish faster.
Yeah, usually if running an overnight sim, which takes a bit more time than your R&D simulations, turning this option should save you some time, and hopefully in the morning you have your simulation ready for rendering.
Yeah, and if you want to be evil, you could even choose don't preview caches, don't show them to me at all, and this way even the cache file content info is not going to be shown. So you could choose this one in case you have your caches over some slow network connection and you don't want this reading of cache files to slow down your simulation. But usually disable during sim is quite enough.
Yeah.
All right. The node viewer application, we mentioned it. Hopefully one day it could become a node editor. But yeah, they just have to make the day 40 hours long. Mesh preview. We have mesh preview in the standalone preview, so it was missing before. So for example, we could use some of these caches right here. Again, we're going to use the results of the, actually this is the standalone simulation that I just started. So I'm going to preview the fire and smoke simulation as a mesh. Right here is a mesh preview. I can enable show mesh, and then I have to be careful which my surface channel is. So I'm going to use I don't think that this simulation
there is no smoke, so you have to use the temperature.
Yeah, either the temperature. So if it's temperature, the isosurface level has to be something around 800. So I'm going to disable the voxel preview, and here is the mesh. We also have a wireframe option for the mesh. Here it is. And this was the last missing piece of the previews that we have in Max and Maya. So now we have it in the standalone preview as well. Also, okay. So I have to add an option to mesh the velocity. Okay, I have it. Here it is. So yeah, we can even mesh the velocity field of the simulator like this, because we can. So yeah, now we could have all the velocities which are higher than 2.5 get included in the mesh, and yeah, that's a way to get some interesting results from your simulation.
Yes, and if you need to bake a preview, you can just save an image sequence out of the Phoenix previewer directly, so that you can preview it later or send it to your friends or supervisors, so that they can approve and enjoy your work.
Yeah, here's how it looks. Hopefully, one day we could even connect this to Chaos Player so that you could view it directly inside it. And yeah, so again, if you're new to Phoenix, the Phoenix previewer, it's quick. Now it's associated with all of the Phoenix cache files on the hard disk. And one of its very important tasks is to save out image sequences, which you could do in mesh mode. You could save out image sequences in voxel preview mode. So let's do it like this. And if we go back to the hard drive, here is the image sequence as a sequence of voxels. Or we could enable the GPU preview. So for this simulation, it's not very interesting, but you could save out a sequence in any of the allowed modes. So here it is. Closing it now, and going back to the changelog. And yeah, we also have a preview of the voxel viscosity in the standalone preview. We didn't have it. We didn't have this before. GPU preview. Now we can finally show smoke opacity modulated or replaced by textures in the viewport of 3ds Max and Maya. So let's see what this. Okay, so I'm going to reset it.
You can do large smoke preset.
Let's do a large smoke preset.
Yeah, actually, this new functionality is really great and saves a lot of time when setting up scenes with textures. So up until now, you could use textures for rendering, but if you wanted to check how those textures are affecting your simulations inside of the viewport, you couldn't. So now, essentially, what we did is if we add a texture for the smoke. So Svetlu will add a gradient ramp, and we can modulate the smoke, and immediately you can see that the smoke vanished because we need to change the mapping for the texture. By default, it's using explicit mapping, but in order to use explicit mapping, you need to have TextUVW data exported. By default, this is not the case. So we switch to planar mapping, and now adjusting the color ramp, you can see how this affects the simulation right inside of the viewport. So now this makes setting up scenes a lot faster. You don't have to do renders or use IPR while setting up your textures. So we hope that this will save you a lot of time when creating your scenes.
I can even stop the simulation right now, and you can see that you could just basically chop off parts of the smoke when using a gradient ramp. You could use a noise. You could even use the V-Ray distance texture, but beware that it is quite a bit slower than the other textures, so it might not be very pleasant to work with in the preview. And again, yeah, I could switch between XY, YZ, ZX coordinates like this, and just remove some parts of the simulation, or I could even change the gradient type, for example, to a box. So now I have a box-shaped hole inside of the smoke.
Yeah, just a note that for now we've implemented this only for the smoke opacity, but support for the other texture slot is coming as well. So stay posted, and we'll let you know when you can grab a nightly and test it for the other texture slots as well. Oh, this one looks quite cool.
Yeah, this is not bad. Let's see, how do I rescale it?
You need to change the tiling.
Yeah, let's change it. But I need smaller tiling in order to make it large. Something like this, and even smaller. So, since we had adaptive grid, when you used object XYZ, this means that the texture gets stretched with the box of the simulator all the time. But if you go to world XYZ, this means that the texture would stay fixed in space. So this is one big difference between these two mapping types. So now you can see that this hole that we created with the radio gradient map on the box is going to just stay in one place. Oops, let's go to 4.02. And yeah, now the viewport preview of Phoenix is even more powerful. Okay, cache converter. Cache converter is another command line tool that Phoenix has. Again, it's next to the standalone previewer, the standalone simulator, the standalone node editor, and here is the standalone cache converter. So by default, what it could do is just cache converter. If you don't know the arguments like me, or you keep forgetting them like me, you could just execute it, and it's going to tell you some simple example command lines. So I could get a source file, for example, like this, and a destination file, which I have to figure out the name for. So something like, something like
test
something
something.
underscore or, for example, or it could be a VDB file, and destination file does not have a valid extension. But why? Yeah, maybe I messed something up.
Or you have spaces,
I
so you have to use
name.
quotes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here they are. Get some quotes. All right. So, but because I dragged in the name of the file, so I converted only cache file 000. But if I want to convert the entire sequence, I can replace this with hashtags. And now I've converted the entire sequence. What I converted it to, I don't know. Probably I just converted it to the same thing with different name. But I have other options. So, for example, I can display the cache info of the loaded cache file. I could specify the start and end frame where the between which the conversion takes place. I can change the storage quality of the other files, so I can make stronger or weaker compression. Or I can choose which particle or grid channels to remove from the cache file in order to make it smaller. And now the new option that we have is grid resolution scale. So first off, let me see how this cache file that I'm working with looks like. Flipping the up axis again, and here it is. Yeah, we are working actually with the large smoke preset of the last simulation that we ran. So now in frame 70, we have 1.8 million voxels. So now I could do the same conversion, but with the quotes, and use the grid res scale option and set it to 0.5. Oops. So let's see. Am I converting cache 0 again?
Yeah, you can try directly frame 70. So that.
Let me just try the entire sequence. It should be fairly
quick. Yeah. If you use reduced grid resolution, it will make the grid cache. It will make the caches smaller, so it should be a lot faster. And yeah, if we go back to the last frame, you can see that now it's 200 cells.
200,000 cells. Yeah. So yeah, from the first frame, we can see that it's much lower resolution. So compared to this, oops, am I comparing it to this? Here it is. So here is the original one, and here is the reduced one, and I can also increase the resolution, not only decrease it. So for example, I can do it like this, and add more resolution to the cache files, but beware that we cannot figure out details out of thin air. So these caches are going to be larger, they're going to have more voxels, but eventually they're just going to be smoother and not much more detailed than the original ones. So decreasing the resolution is the more practical thing to do. Eventually we would think about adding details when increasing the resolution. So here is the new cache file. And you can see that it surpassed the 1.8 million voxels even at frame 15, and now it's at much higher resolution than before.
But yeah, just mind that when increasing the grid resolution through the cache converter, it's just a simple interpolation. So if you need higher res simulations, you can just use the resimulation method inside of Max or Maya. So this will give you the proper higher res simulation caches that when you need more detail out of your simulation.
Indeed. Okay, the simulation restore button, Georgi already showed you this, and now it's much more handy. Otherwise, it was a button in the simulator, it continues living there. Jet engine preset, Stormy C, IceCube, Speedboat. Support for Max 2023. We've been in Max 2023 since we started recording the video. And also there is support for Maya 2023, and here it is. So for the Maya version of Phoenix, and also Phoenix for Maya now supports Mac OS. So until now we had Phoenix builds only for Windows and Linux. Now we also have Mac, and there is one more specific thing for Phoenix for Maya, which was really killing me until now. So now finally we allowed. So let me see what node should I. Okay, so I might just start off with a preset. I'm just going to create a fire preset, and right here in the fire source and in other Phoenix nodes where you could select objects, you have these buttons where you could start editing the sets connected to a certain object. And now, first off, the set that you are editing is selected by default in the left pane. And also, if you are a bit evil and, for example, somehow decide to delete your set, it's going to get recreated when you press the edit button right here. So otherwise, you had to do this manually. So again, this affects the Phoenix source and all of the other nodes where you have node selector slots like this, which are going through the set editor. Okay, so also Windows 11 support. There was something with NUMA machines where not all of the CPU cores were recognized. So we did a fix for this. So now Windows 11 support is full. And Windows Vista is no longer supported. So for all of you who are using Windows Vista now, you have to use at least Windows 7. And as far as you know, Microsoft is not planning to support Windows 7 for much longer. So you have to plan for an upgrade. Okay, and finally, tooltips for many of the simulators rollouts in Max. So we had tooltips in Maya all along. So most of the Phoenix options in Maya they had tooltips until now, but now we also finally have tooltips starting to appear in some of the rollouts of Phoenix for Max. So even in the volumetric option, floating window, we have added tooltips for all of the options, and we will keep going until all of the parameters have their tooltips.
Yeah, this is a quick way to check what an option is doing without going to the docs. So we hope they're useful and they can help you create even more awesome simulations.
Yay! Okay, so these were all the new features. We have a bunch of improvements. So again, we have speed ups of the fire smoke simulations, another algorithm which is multi-threaded, which is the adaptive grid when pre-allocation is on. This is this option right here. So you can see that for this simulation it's disabled, but for example, when you choose always or when you choose when adaptive, this needed to be multi-threaded, now it is. So it's one of the final remaining single-threaded algorithms in Phoenix. Now everything that humankind knows about is multi-threaded. Allowed the use of the same as output macro as the resimulation output path. And when we do this, it actually allows us to repeatedly increase the resolution. So basically this means that now resimulation can write to the same caches that it reads from. So Georgi mentioned resimulation. I'm going to show you how it works very quickly. So let's start off with a very low res fire preset. I'm going to additionally decrease the resolution so that it becomes terribly low res. So for example, like this. I could actually check the output rollout and make sure that I have velocity. Okay, I have velocity. So now that I have velocity, I could enable resimulation, grid resimulation like this. And by default, it's going to amplify the resolution of the simulation and double the voxel size along each axis. So you will get 8 times more voxels. So by default, it reads these cache files, the base cache files of the simulation. And by default, when you start a resimulation, it's going to, okay, so there is no wavelet channel. It's not going to add any more detail when it increases the resolution. In order to do that, I have to simulate with, okay, the resimulation is done. In order to add more detail to the simulation, I have to have enabled wavelet in advance before I start the original simulation. So otherwise, I would just get more resolution, but not much more detail. And now, by default, the resimulation created another cache sequence called just like the first one, but with resim in the name. Now, what I can do is actually overwrite the original simulation by pasting same as output right here in the same field. Start the simulation. It's going to complain about the wavelet channel missing, but next time I'm going to enable it, I promise. And yep, it's done. And I've successfully overwritten the original caches. I can browse to them from here. And now I can see that, yeah, these caches start from 2 megabytes and with 2 megabytes and a half. And if I start resimulation again, I'm going to overwrite these caches again and increase the resolution even more.
Yeah, you can see that now our grid resolution became from 700,000 cells. Now it's 5 million. And if we run it again, it will become even higher.
Yeah, it will be something like 40 million next time. And yeah, we will multiply it by 8 each time, actually, depending on this option right here.
Essentially, what this helps you with is if you're a bit tight on simulation space, and if you know that this is the exact thing that you want to do, you can just run resimulation over your original files and you can save some space.
Yeah. If you enable wavelet, like I did not, and if you have a super raw resimulation that you're happy with, and you want to add more detail using wavelet turbulence, but you don't know how much detail you can add, and you don't know how much time and space it's going to take, you could iteratively increase resolution like this, just adding more and more resolution until you're happy. Resimulation is going to keep the shape and the behavior of the simulation just like the original, so that there won't be any unpleasant surprises when you do this. So yeah, it's one more thing that makes Phoenix much more flexible. One additional thing is that until now, by default, flip liquid resimulation always did overwrite the original caches. So now we've added the option for flip liquid resimulations to actually create a separate cache sequence when you resimulate. I'm not going to show this. It's working just much like the resimulation that I already showed you. Sped up and improved thread balance of liquid simulations with moving obstacles. So this was not optimal before, and now it's better. We already mentioned that B2B interaction and splash liquid wake are now better, and they also behave much more nicely with ocean simulations. Here is another change that is a bit more specific. We have, for flip liquid simulations, we have the ability to convert splash particles to mist particles. So for example, if I create a waterfall,
maybe reduce the grid resolution.
Maybe reduce the grid resolution, but I'm not sure that I'm going to live until the simulation ends. Anyway, so I'm just going to be very quick. We have splashes here in the splash rollout that can create mist particles. And we can choose how many splashes get converted to mist, how quickly this happens. And we can choose until Phoenix 5, mist amount could not be a number below 1, because it wouldn't be just physically correct for splash particles to die, but producing less mist particles, because we would just be reducing the liquid volume. We would be losing liquid when we do this. But now we actually allow this because it allows you to gain more flexibility.
Yeah, sometimes reality is not what we're after. Sometimes we want creative solutions that allow us to bend the reality in a way that allows us to create the exact shot that we aim for. So now you can cheat reality.
Yeah, practical considerations of this is that we had scenes that were set up to work just right. Splash particles worked exactly as they should have, as we expected. But these scenes, they just produced a ton of mist particles. So the mist particles were just so many that they slowed the simulation down. We didn't need all of these mist particles, so we allowed the mist amount to be a number below 1, or you could even set it to 0. Cool. Ocean simulations with adaptive grid can now expand upwards without the ocean level changing. So should I show this, or should we?
Yeah, we can change it.
Yeah,
fairly quick. You can.
Let me create just a simple low-res simulator, which is going to be fairly flat, so that it would be able to expand upwards. And I'm just going to splash a geometry inside it.
You can splash a sphere.
Yeah. Initial field 50. Start the simulation. Here it is. And then I can create a sphere or even a box. And make it fall from the sky quickly. And when I do this, if I don't enable adaptive grid, liquid should start splashing up and colliding with the upper part of the simulator. Maybe I have to make it even faster because I want liquid to fly off even higher.
Maybe your scene scale is a bit large, but yeah, I think this will do.
Maybe it could be a bit small. So let me increase the scene scale.
Okay.
And I will also enable the mesh preview. Okay, let me try one last time. Splashing.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so now our grid definitely is not tall enough. So I'm going to the grid rollout, enable adaptive grid, and let's see how it goes. Here it is. Before Phoenix 5, if you did this, the ocean level would have started rising up because here it says that the ocean level is at 50%, so it was going to start increasing and stay at 50% as the grid expanded upwards.
Yeah, and as you can see, in this case, our grid started expanding to the side. So maybe in most cases, this is not what you want. So you could limit your adaptive grid to expand only in the Z up direction by using the maximum expansion panel. And if we start the simulation again, now it should start expanding only upwards without going to the side.
Yeah, making ocean simulations with adaptive grid that expands to the side is not a good idea. Trust us. Okay, so this is how it looks. Okay, sped up simulations, again, about rendering with the V-Ray GPU while the CPU simulation is running. We showed this with IPR GPU. New model for calculating buoyancy of active bodies. So now active bodies with large-scale ocean simulations using the waveforms are much more credible and much better than what we had with Phoenix 4. So we already released a tutorial which was using a nightly build with this option for a large-scale ocean wave. So let me just find it right here. Epic ocean waves. So this tutorial, it included this change. So if you were using the nightly build or if you download Phoenix 5, you would be able to take advantage of that option. And going back to the version changelogs. Okay, collider type option.
Yeah, we have added a few collider types. So if you create a body,
let me create a body.
Yeah, third body. And if you go into the property lister, yes, and if we create properties for the bodies, you can see that the bodies now have a few collider types. So by default, we used a simple concave mode that would allow us faster simulations. But in case you have some complex objects with more detailed geometry and you need more precise collisions, where the shape has a certain degree of importance, you can use the more precise ones or the fastest ones. So the box collision types will be the fastest one, but it will give you not the greatest collisions ever. But if you go for with just simple boxes or some spheres or really simple objects, the faster collider types will give you some speed gain. While if you need more complex ones like robots, or if you decide to go wild with the geometry, you can try the slowest methods. They will produce a lot better results, but at the expense of increased simulation times. So the slowest ones might slow your simulation a few times. So make sure to use them only when needed and when your collisions don't look that good.
Indeed. Okay, so this simulation is definitely slower. Okay, so we're not going to wait for this, but indeed these are the most precise methods, but they are going to come at the cost of simulation time. Reduce the required V-Ray GPU memory when rendering fire and smoke volumes. Also, the probabilistic shading, it was enabled until now, even for the scanline renderer, and this produced some results that really didn't make any sense, so now it's enabled only for V-Ray. This is also an improvement where when we had VR scenes exported from Max, for example, or this means that any kind of rendering inside of Maya, which always goes through VR scenes. The render start took a lot of time when we had many simulators, so now this is improved. V-Ray GPU, when you used point mode before, it didn't render anything. Now it falls back to bubble mode so that you could see any result and don't wonder what's going on. And now the Phoenix Mesher has the ability to mesh the surface from the viscosity channel. So that this way, if you have a simulation with varying viscosity, for example, if you have some object melting or some object solidifying, you could change the volume of the object as the viscosity changes. So, for example, if you have a candle, you can really make the parts of the candle that melt away just mesh realistically. So as you melt away parts of the candle, the mesh is going to shrink. Frame blending is now twice faster. So frame blending means whenever you have a simulation and you want to retime it, basically. So for example, if I have this, again, this fire preset, and if I want to retime the simulation by changing the time band settings right here, if I'm changing the play speed or any of the other options, or if I'm using the animated cache index mode, this is going to work twice faster. Beware that when you do this, this happens inside the viewport. So every time you change the timeline frame, this algorithm is going to kick in and is going to take some time. So even if you return to the previous frame, it's going to be calculated again when you are just changing the speed of the simulation, so it could be slow.
Yeah, because it needs to read the caches before and the caches after so that it knows how to blend them. And if your caches are fairly large, then this will take some time to process them because it reads not only one frame, but a few frames. So this might slow your viewport previews with some time. But in this case, if you don't want your viewport preview to suffer, you could just disable the viewport preview and just scrub the timeline as we've showed a few minutes before. And now Svetlana is showing the precise tracing, which allows for smoother grid blending and should give you a better result.
But again, if you want the smoothest possible retiming of simulations, especially for fire and smoke, you should use resimulation with time band controls. For liquids, it's not that scary. Liquids get retimed really easily. So for them, you just change the play speed and everything happens automatically. But again, they take some time from scoring the timeline. And again, if you render a sequence, rendering retimed caches is going to be slightly slower than rendering caches that are just correspond one-to-one each cache to each timeline frame. All right. Now our OpenVDB version is updated from 5 to 8. So we have advanced 3 steps forward in the future. Now VDBs that are exported from the Phoenix simulation or the cache converter are getting sparsified, so they are no longer dense grids, and they should be generally smaller. Again, Phoenix's Aura files, they have very good compression, so we always recommend using Aura files with Phoenix and the V-Ray volume grid. VDBs are sparse, which means that they are more universal, but sparsity means slow. So sparse grids incur like 20 or 30% slowdown on your simulations and rendering. So if you don't need them, you should not use them. If you have enough memory, just go with overfiles. They are faster to render, and they also take up less space on your hard drive. Unless they are just huge grids, which are just basically empty inside, which is when you should use VDBs. Now we also recognized by default the velocity, X, Y, and Z channels from thinking particles when you load VDBs from them. And also the standalone preview and the cache converter, they show the sizes on storage of different data chunks inside of overfiles. So if I find some overfiles again and open them in the Phoenix previewer, here we can see that we have 0 megabytes for cache info and 1.6 megabytes for grid data. And for cache files which have, for example, liquid particles, we have much more diverse info, but this should be useful to you if you're wondering what takes up the most space in your cache file and you might decide that you don't need a certain grid or particle channel. This would give you the info where you should start from.
Yeah, and if you decide that you need to remove a certain channel that you don't need, you can use the cache converter, like we showed before, so that the cache converter can strip the channels or the particles that you don't need, so that your caches are lighter and faster to render.
Yay! All right, so we showed you that the Phoenix installer now associates the Phoenix previewer as a default program. I can even show you how this looks. Or I might not be able to show you because I deleted my installer from Phoenix. But I'm going to download a new one. Just going to download.chaos.com and I'm going to grab Phoenix for Max 2022 so I don't have to shut down my Max 2023. And there would be an option to choose whether you want to associate your Aura, VDB, PRT, and F3D files with the Phoenix previewer or not. Oops. Here is the installer. I accept the agreement, and under the advanced rollout, okay, I don't have V-Ray 5, and here it is. So I can uncheck the file associations if I don't want, but by default they are all selected. Quit. Also, yeah, our VDB and F3D files can be drag and dropped inside the Phoenix previewer. This is something that just should be working. Now we also have the auto load latest option, which is used when you choose to simulate sim scenes together with showing them in the standalone preview. So if I choose auto load latest, it's going to just scroll to the latest cache file and it's going to monitor the file system. If a new cache file, for example, cache file 24 appears, it's going to show it.
So that you can see the last frame that your simulation is running and you can see how it progresses.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, there is a right-click menu over the loaded cache file path in the standalone preview, so you can copy the name and the path. This is just a small thing. And also there is now finally there is an option for log verbosity in the Phoenix log. So for example, I can show it in Maya. It's the same in Max. If I open the Phoenix preferences here from the Phoenix FD menu, here it is. The log file verbosity could be only the important info, a lot of info, even more info in debug mode, which is going to eventually make your simulation slower. So watch out for that. Don't enable it unless you really need it. Or it could show only the warnings, or it could show only any errors. So by default, it's showing the important info. It has no performance implications. So and if you run into a problem and ask Chaos support or us directly to help you with your problem, and if we ask you for the Phoenix log, which is right here, the important info is going to be helpful to us to identify any issues. So at least keeping it important would be good. And also there is the log verbosity option for the standalone simulator. If you don't want your console flooded with info that you don't need, you could also specify it via a command line argument. Presets. So indeed, we improved the fire quick preset. The cold smoke preset is now also better. And the candle preset is also changed. Ink in water, I showed you the changes that now all of the emitters are using the single particle shader with the color from particle RGB channel option. And the ocean preset is also improved. Now it resembles our, I can even show you how the preset works. It resembles our ship example scene and our ship tutorial much better. So the settings are very close to the ship tutorial, and you can find the ship tutorial right here under the tutorials and examples, tutorials, and ship in the ocean. Here is how it looks like, and the toolbar preset now much closely resembles that. The particle texture is now going to allow selecting channels that are not available in the entire cache sequence.
So before, if you had a simulation which had particles and they had like RGB channel exported only for the first 10 frames, but the next 100 frames didn't have RGB channel, you couldn't pick the RGB channel because we wanted to prevent cases where your particles are colored for the first 10 frames and after this they turn suddenly black. But by popular demand, we brought this option up. So now even if you have like 10 frames where you have a certain channel exported that is missing for the later frames, you can still use this in the particle texture.
Indeed. So here's how it looks. So I enabled age in the middle of the simulation. So now it tells me that there is age, but it's not in all the frames. So if you're going to use age for example, remapping the color of the particle texture by age, you should be in for some surprises. So hopefully this will not be a surprise now that we mentioned this here. Also, this is visible in the PRT exporter right here. Okay. The plane force now has an option to separately affect temperature and smoke. Let me show you. Here is the plane force. And here is the option. So it allows you to affect all of the fire and smoke channels separately from the others. So this should, again, allow you to be more flexible. Yeah, so there was a missing texture slot in the liquid simulator for surface by texture. Not sure, you might have watched some of our tutorials, but you could mesh a texture in Phoenix, and it looks like this. So if I create just an empty simulator, I don't simulate anything, and if I scroll to the rendering and select the surface channel from the texture and just create what? Maybe a noise. Yeah. Let's create some noise and enable the mesh preview, and here is a noise.
And we can render this right now as a mesh, and as you can see it in the viewport. But what we did for Phoenix 5 is we have allowed this functionality inside of the liquid simulator as well, because up until now you could use textures only for the fire and smoke simulators. But now you can use this for the liquid simulators as well, and this will help you mesh together, for example, the liquid and the splashes, so that your mesh gets a lot more detail. And Svetlin has a really cool tutorial series. I think it's 2 or 3 parts where he goes into more detail how this works exactly. So we'll link this in the description below, and you can see how this works.
Yeah, check out the. You can just look up meshing any particle system with Phoenix on YouTube, and you can find it. We're not going to go into more details because this has been explained. So some renames. We're nearing the end. Show a warning and show another warning. And there was something that I wanted to show: Cosmos assets.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have Chaos Cosmos, which is a pretty cool content library. So if you ever run out of models, you could just open the Cosmos browser right here from the V-Ray toolbar, and there are a bunch of different categories. We have furniture, accessories. There are vehicles, cars, jet boats, for example. We could even some of the new presets like the active body Speedboat preset, you could just grab this jet boat from right here, and you could use it as the base for this preset. So the only important thing is that in Maya, this should work right off the bat. In Max, you have to convert it to an editable mesh in order to be able to use it with the Phoenix preset.
Actually, if you control Z, so
let me do that.
So, yeah, well, so let's leave it so as a proxy. And in the proxy options, actually, there is an option that's called import as mesh. A bit below your mouse. Yeah, there it is. That's right at the top.
Yep. Here it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you click this, it will duplicate your object and it will create a mesh while still retaining your proxy. So if you want to use the proxy for rendering later, you could use that. But you have a mesh object as well. And now you can use this object inside of preset. So this is editable mesh.
And if I choose these three, I can create an ice cube preset from them. I hope. Probably. Oh, they are. Maybe I can shrink the grid a bit. Like this, and then let them simulate.
Also, note that some Cosmos assets are a bit high on poly count, so this will slow down the simulation. As you can see right now, the simulation needs quite some time to start because the objects are a bit high on the poly count.
Yeah. Okay, so we might have to wait a bit for the simulation. And
yeah, maybe we can choose.
Maybe you can choose a different asset.
A different asset because this one is a bit slow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's stop it. Reset it. Don't save. Show me the Cosmos browser. And what else do we have? People.
Yeah, we can try the people.
This guy looks pretty good, so let me convert him to an editable mesh and make him into a nice cube.
And now this moves a lot faster.
Yay! Okay, so if you ever run out of ideas of what models do you want to float in the water or set on fire or do anything with them in Phoenix, Cosmos can help you.
Yes, and Cosmos is a great way to find hundreds, even thousands of models, I think. They come preset with all the materials, so you can just download them, drag and drop them in your scene, and you can use them in your liquid simulations, light them on fire, emit smoke from them, so whatever your imagination can think of.
Yeah, and here it is. Splash.
Yeah.
I think that with this we can close this video. It became quite long, so thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed the new things in Phoenix.
And we hope that your simulations would look even better, will work faster, and we can't wait to see what results you come up with.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks everyone, and see you guys later.
See you later.